welcome to The Skinny for Friday, the 13th, September 13th. I'm Mitch Perry, senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleagues Ray Roa, the editor-in-chief of Creative Loafing, and author and independent reporter Ben Montgomery. Good morning, guys.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Mitch. How's it going?
Hey, well, we survived the fundraiser from last week, and
How'd we do?
I don't have the
We were
finals
a little
here.
bit short.
Yeah.
We could probably use another $600 if you
Is
got
that what it is? I'm not sure.
Pocket.
But we want to thank everybody who did call in,
for
though,
sure.
and contribute, and that's really appreciated listening to The Skinny. And so let's talk about what's going to be on today. Later on the show, by the way, we hope we'll have some time at the very end to talk about the developments of this week politically, talk about the presidential debate, and have our listeners talk about that. But we're also going to speak later with an Orlando-based attorney, a Republican, who claims in a new lawsuit that Ron DeSantis, chief of staff, was one of a group of Republicans who tried to persuade him to drop out of his race for state attorney in Orange and Osceola counties this summer. Thomas Fighter said he wasn't dropping out, and now he's naming names in a pretty explosive lawsuit claiming election interference on the part of the governor. But first we want to talk to, I want to bring up what happened last week in Georgia, right? There was another school shooting, another tragic school shooting. You know, we are talking about these issues in these presidential debates about immigration and inflation, all these big things, but gun violence, right? School shootings, it seems to me it's one of these things that when it happens again, we just like wring our hands and go, oh, it shouldn't be happening, but it keeps on happening. So 9 days ago in Winder, Georgia, the deadliest school shooting in 2024 took place where a teenager used an assault rifle to kill 4 people, 2 teachers and 2 students before surrendering to the police. 7 others were wounded and 2 more suffered injuries. And joining us right now from South Florida to talk about how we're trying to keep our schools safe here in Florida is Broward County Democratic Representative Christine Hunschofsky. Representative Hunschofsky, are you with us this morning?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Great to hear from you. Thank you so much. Christine Hunschofsky has been serving in the Florida House since 2020. Previously, she was the mayor of Parkland when that shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school took place in February of 2018, and she'll be the leader of the Florida House Democrats starting in the fall of 2026. So again, Representative, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We did want to talk to you, and we'll talk to you about some other issues going on in the state, but obviously, you know, you were there in Parkland as the mayor when that happened. I want to talk about how we're dealing with this here in Florida. We had, of course, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill that was passed in the legislature just weeks after that tragedy took place in 2018. And, you know, one of the things we had in there is red flag laws, which allow law enforcement officials to file risk protection order petitions for those people who think that somebody's at risk to themselves or their loved ones because of a gun situation. That's one of the big provisions we have there. How is that, in your opinion, working right now, 6 years in that law here in Florida?
Yeah, well, first of all, the red flag laws, it was amazing how everyone came together after the tragedy we had in Parkland to put this bill together. And the red flag laws that were implemented as part of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act started working right away. We actually had a case in Broward County where a gentleman was hearing voices coming from the air conditioning in the walls and was heavily armed at home. And so the red flag laws were used for the first time in Broward County after they passed. And they've since been used over 15,000 times in the state of Florida. And they've gained support from people who were actually very skeptical in the beginning. Again, you go in front of a judge. This isn't, somebody calls in and your guns are taken away from you. You have the due process. And the whole goal is to make sure that someone who has firearms is, or someone who's is a risk to hurt themselves or someone else, that they don't have access to firearms. So it's been working in the state of Florida, and it's had a lot of support, like I said, especially from sheriffs who maybe were skeptical in the beginning, but it's been used over 15,000 times and it's working.
Well, let's talk about now. By the way, let's go back to the Georgia situation, if we could, for a moment. Last week, we know that the father has been arrested in this case too, and I believe, so that was he was the father of the shooter at Appalachia High School. He's been charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. I know I saw you on X last week. You applauded that. You thought that was a good move. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, a tip was called in The local law enforcement went to the home, spoke to the father. We've seen body cam footage of that. Spoke to the killer, who at the time, there was mention that he had said he was going to do a school shooting. So everything was done properly up until that point. They asked about guns in the home. So the father was very well aware of what the concerns were and that a tip was reported. And then to be so devoid of reality and completely irresponsible, he purchases the weapon for his son that his son then used to kill people. I applaud him being arrested and held accountable, because with rights and responsibilities come accountability.
Right.
And it was the same thing that happened in Michigan with the Oxford shooter. The parents were also arrested, and I think that is absolutely what should be happening in these cases.
If you're just tuning in right now, we're speaking to Broward County Democratic State Rep Christine Hunschofsky, talking about the school shooting last week in Georgia and our state laws here regarding school shootings here in Florida, and just trying to keep our schools safer. Now, I learned this. I know the situation at Parkland, Representative Hunschofsky, so much better than I do, I think, in certain ways. I was reading the New York Times last week when it came to the fact that, as we mentioned, there was an investigator in Georgia last year that interviewed the son and the father last year about his online threat, that in the case of Parkland, two school guidance counselors and a sheriff's deputy had recommended that the shooter at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, I don't even want to mention his name, that he be forcibly admitted for psychiatric care, though no such committal ever took place. Were you familiar with that?
I didn't follow the psychological aspect as much, but I do know that police were at his home several times. The thing is, we didn't have red flag laws at the time, which could have helped prevent him from purchasing the weapon that he ultimately used to kill 17, wound 17 others, and traumatize thousands in our community.
Well, I was reading last week in the New York Times that 9 states, including Florida, now require in-school threat assessment teams to identify students at risk of committing violence. So you're familiar with that?
Yes, absolutely. That passed in 2023 here in the state of Florida. And listen, safety and school safety is all about layers. And it includes identifying people who are struggling early on, making sure getting the help and the services. It never gets escalated to being a safety concern. And then also having things like single points of entry, doors that are locked. We now in Broward County have metal detectors at our high schools. And all these layers are steps toward preventing a shooting from happening.
Now, we're also one of, I believe, only 4 states in the country which allow teachers and school personnel to be armed. And I was there in the legislature a couple years ago when that bill went through. It was pretty controversial, as you know. I haven't really heard anything, certainly anything negative that has happened since that time. What are your thoughts about that part of what we have allowing now here in schools in Florida?
Yeah, so what had worked out, though, was it couldn't have been anybody who was full-time a teacher. Okay. So, we have the guardians on campuses that are trained, and their number one job is security. I personally believe that you should have security on campus, and if somebody's job is security, that should be their only job, and that should be their focus. And if somebody's job on campus is to teach the students, that should be their singular focus. Having said that, training is so important on what to do in an active shooter situation or in any emergency situation, right? What are the procedures? Where do you go in the classrooms? And so that people don't have to start thinking about it when the situation happens. If they're properly trained and know what to do, it becomes instinctual to keep everybody as safe as possible.
Again, we're speaking with Representative Christine Hunschofsky from Broward County, talking about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act, which was passed just in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy at Parkland back in 2018. As you know, Representative, the last couple of years, the Florida House has actually passed a bill that would repeal part of the 2018 Parkland law to allow individuals 18 and over to be able to purchase a long gun. Now, in both those times, the bills died in the Florida Senate. In fact, I don't think there was even a Senate companion, in part because the Senate president the last couple of years, Kathleen Pasadomo, has shown no interest in passing that type of legislation. But as you know, she's going to be gone next session. There's going to be a new Senate president. I don't know where he stands on this. Are you concerned that that provision could be repealed next year?
Yeah, so it's come up twice in the House, and like you said, it didn't have a Senate companion. The way I look at it, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act has been in so many ways the gold standard in school safety. And how do we know that? And it's been improved upon as we've gone forward. How do we know that? Because thank God we haven't had a school shooting since. And for me personally, having seen what our community's been through, what so many people have been through, I oppose any change to that law because it has been the gold standard. And if it's not broke, I don't see why we would be tinkering around with it.
Right. Let's talk about, if we could, there's a couple other things. I want to talk about guns, but we only have you for a few more minutes, so I want to talk about a couple other issues. As you know, there's been a huge controversy in the last week or so regarding Amendment 4 and the DeSantis administration's involvement. Some would say maybe electioneering, or actually, I'm talking about Amendment 4, the abortion rights measure, electioneering when it comes to having a part of the Agency for Healthcare Administration's website, which tells people what the DeSantis administration saying is just the facts about what would happen if that amendment were to be passed. Now we're of course learning about the state election security police going after, checking out questionable signatures on petitions. The DeSantis administration says this is voter fraud. This is a very serious thing. Democrats yesterday in Congress, 7 of the 8 Florida Democrats in Congress wrote a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland calling in and have the Justice Department investigate what they labeled as election interference on this issue. What do you think about all this that's going on here regarding Amendment 4 and the DeSantis administration?
Yeah, listen, so the argument was overturning Roe versus Wade because these issues need to go back to the state. So now it's back in the state. The Amendment 4 is now on the ballot, which in itself is a very difficult process. The state of Florida has made it more and more difficult for constitutional amendments to get on the ballot. Now it's on the ballot. It passed the Supreme Court, everybody's approvals. You have to get 60% for this to pass. So the voters, 60% or more, need to vote for this for it to pass. Once again, a high barrier to achieve. And now the state government is using public funds to literally campaign against an amendment that the people of Florida will be voting on. That number one, the people of Florida signed petitions to put it on the ballot, and they are now using public funds in campaigning against this amendment. When I read the statute, it reads to me that that is against the law, what they're doing. And I just wonder, when we talk about freedom and we talk about people voting and having the right to vote and that we want to listen to the states, it seems to me that certain people in our state government only want us to listen to them, and they don't want the people's voices to be heard. This is wrong on every level. I'm glad the amendment's on the ballot. Everybody can read the language themselves, and everybody should have the freedom. Everybody who's registered to vote should have the freedom to vote on this ballot measure without interference or any pressure from the state government using taxpayer funds.
Right.
Hey, Representative. Obviously, 6 years since Parkland, and you've had to face constituents who've gone through significant tragedy with their kids. What are you telling your constituents now after a shooting like Georgia about the safety of Florida schools and what the session will look like as far as maybe making them safer or how safe they are now?
Yeah, listen, I think Florida's come a real long way in school safety. If you look back at what happened in Georgia, as awful as it is what happened, there were so many different layers that actually worked that made it. I mean, that shooting could have been so much worse. And that's not to say it wasn't horrible, but I think it's also a reminder we can do all the right things and still these terrible things can happen. So we need to have the training. We need to make sure we're remaining vigilant. And we need to all remember that this could happen in any community. And so it's important for us to work together to make sure that guns don't end up in the hands of people who wish to do harm to themselves or someone else, and that we remain vigilant. And if we see something that's a threat or a concern, that we say something and that the authorities then follow up and do something.
Representative, this is more of a cultural question, but regarding guns. But I'd like to. A listener just wrote in and asked this question, so I'm going to read this question to you. This person writes in: what is your guest take on young people being desensitized to gun violence from excessive hours of playing violent video games? I bet those kids dream about killing people, is what this person writes in. I mean, I know that's, outside the contours of what we're talking about with the state law here, but it goes along, the fact is that the legislature this past year did weigh in on social media in terms of, children, in terms of, or, students, how much younger people could have access to social media. What are your thoughts about the idea? I mean, obviously it's multifactored in terms of what makes young people want to do something horrible, but a specific question about violent video games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know that I can speak to violent video games. But what I can speak to is when we dehumanize other people, in other words, talk about other people like they're not human beings, like they couldn't be someone's mother or father or brother or sister, then it's almost like it makes it easier to do bad things to them. And we've seen that in history. When we've seen any group persecuted, it's usually prefaced by a dehumanization of that group. So I think we all have work to do in our own families, in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities, to make sure that whether we agree or disagree with people, whether we love or don't love people, that we never go down the path of dehumanization, that we remember that we are all human beings. And when we keep that in the forefront and that every person has value, I think that is a lot of what we can do to make sure that we're not seeing attacks against different groups and violence against different groups and or people.
All right, we'll leave it there. Broward County Democratic Representative Christine Hunschofsky. Representative Hunschofsky, thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny here on WMNF.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hope to talk to you again. Okay, we're going to switch gears now. Talking is another big statewide issue here. Well, I guess we'll bring it home here first. Everybody, or I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of our listeners know, of course, about the situation with Andrew Warren, right? We've talked a lot about on MNF for the last couple of years. Ron DeSantis suspended him back in August of 2022. Andrew's now been fighting for that, getting his job back through the courts, and now he's running for re-election November 5th. People will vote in Hillsborough County whether to re-elect him or not. And by the way, we'll have Susie Lopez, who the governor did appoint to succeed him. She'll be on the show next week, so look forward to that. However, in Orlando, as we've also had on the show, we've had Monique Worrell on. Monique Worrell was the state attorney from the 9th Judicial Circuit, which encompasses Orlando, city of Orlando, Orange, and Osceola counties. Same situation happened to her a year ago where DeSantis suspended her. So he put in to replace her a man by the name of Andrew Bain, who now is going to be running against Monique Worrell in November. However, he's running as an independent. And in fact, there was a Republican primary, of course, a couple of weeks ago. And joining us right now, who was one of the candidates running in that race, the Republican race for a judicial state attorney in the 9th Judicial Circuit, is Thomas Fighter. Mr. Fighter, you're here with us right now.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
All right. Great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. So you were a candidate who filed to run against Monique Worrell in November as the Republican race. As we mentioned, Andrew Bain is the man appointed by DeSantis to replace Worrell last year. Now, you ran and lost in the primary to another Orlando-based attorney, Seth Hyman, so Hyman is now running against, there's like a three-way race, right, basically, or was going to be between Hyman, Andrew Bain, and also Monique Worrell. But then all of a sudden, last week, I guess it was, Seth Hyman drops out of the race. And there's no longer a Republican running against Monique Worrell. There's only Andrew Bain, the independent, and Monique Worrell. So you started, you also challenged, basically you're claiming election interference, and you filed a lawsuit in the Ninth Circuit on Wednesday of this week, claiming that a faction of the GOP, including DeSantis, his chief of staff, James Othmeyer, Seth Hyman, as well as the chair of the Orange County Republican Party and some other attorneys, conspired to ensure that Bain did not face a Republican in the general election. Can you talk to us about this?
Yeah, sure. All of what you just said is absolutely correct. So the whole goal was to ensure that no one challenged Bain. They wanted to siphon votes to him, as many as possible, and they wanted to show that the Republican establishment, or really the entire Republican Party of Florida, was squarely behind Bain, which we are not. They do not speak for all Republicans, and it's just tremendously offensive to all Americans, especially the patriots and military veterans. I served in the military, and one of the things they ingrained in us was meritocracy. Like, you don't get to be promoted unless you earned it on the merits. And it's just disgusting to me to see that these people are put in positions of power, not because they earned it on the merits, but because of something that is very, in my opinion, un-American. And that is the spoil system that DeSantis has deployed here to turn Florida, red.
Now, we know that, like I said, you just filed a lawsuit this week, and you talked about this on Monday in a press conference. But in fact, you complained about this back in July. You filed a complaint with the Florida Bar because, and please get into the details here, in that claim with the Florida Bar, which you also mentioned in your lawsuit, you name names of people in the Republican Party, specifically James Othmeyer, who spoke to you, sat down with you, and said, you need to get out of this race. So talk about that.
James Othmeyer and this attorney named Jeff Aaron with the Gray Robinson law firm here in Orlando sat me down in a private room at the Rose and Shingle Creek resort and said, "What are you doing? We're behind Bain. Bain needs to win. Bain is Governor DeSantis's anointed person. He needs to stay state attorney. If you want to be something else, you can be something else. There are a lot of judgeships. There are a lot of, circuit court, county court. There's state representatives. We can help you get any one of those. What do you want to be?" I said, "Well, I don't want any of those things. I want the governor to endorse me because I'm a real Republican and I have better qualifications than Andrew Bain. So present my case to the governor and let me know." At this point, neither one of these gentlemen really knew me. And I was I guess a little offended by that, but I was being very cordial with them. I said, "Look, please look into my qualifications, look at Andrew Bain's, and you guys decide who the better candidate." I mean, it's shocking to me to think that I have to ask members of my Republican Party to endorse me over a non-party affiliation candidate who Andrew Bain claims to be, and I'm calling BS on all of that. Andrew Bain, I believe this is years in the making that they said, "Look, Andrew, do not switch to the Republican Party. We're going to plant you there so that you can, be the quote unquote nonpartisan person, but we're really going to back you up."
And
so I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tom, and we just interject there for a moment. And that is one of the reasons, perhaps, and you tell me, you live out there in Orlando, is that jurisdiction is pretty Democratic leaning, right? And so theoretically, Bain might have a better chance as an NPA, non-party affiliate, than as a Republican.
There's no question about that. No Republican has put in for state attorney in many, many years. I think the last one was like 12 years ago when Lawson Lamar was still running. No Republican would put in because no Republican felt like they could reasonably win. I was trying to argue with these guys, look, we can win if we do it right. I've got a great name. My name is Fightter in quotes after my name. I'm well known in the community. We can do it. We need the financial support of the Republican Party. And they said they would think about it. So we left that meeting and they called me later saying, "Nope, we spoke with the governor. Andrew is his man. You need to drop out or your business will suffer." Jeff Aaron said, "We're going to come after you and your family." That is exactly what he said.
What?
He was angry. He was yelling on the phone. And he called me a selfish a-hole if I didn't drop out. And I tried to be as cordial as I could with him, ended it as friendly as I could. And then same thing happened with Joshua Grosshands. I called him because I got a letter from Aaron Huntley saying that the Orange County Republican Party of Florida was endorsing Seth Hyman. I said, this can't be right. You're joking. I mean, Seth was fired for being unethical. He has a poor reputation in the community. Why? He's not even a veteran. He doesn't have any of the qualifications that I do. How is it that our Republican Party can support somebody who is just clearly not qualified? This is a really bad look. And they said, we're supporting him because he's a team player. Seth will drop out after the primary. He's a team player to help the Republican, and I'm like, we shouldn't do it like this, guys.
Wait, so Thomas, again, we're speaking with Thomas Fighter. He's an attorney in Orlando who's filed a lawsuit against Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, I think, is named in the lawsuit, also who's chief of staff for election interference. So, Mr. Fighter, you saying that it was in part of these discussions when they said they were backing Seth Hyman, that Seth Hyman, they also talked about how Seth Hyman would drop out of the race after he wins the Republican primary?
Absolutely.
Which is what happened, of course, last week. He dropped out.
Just the plan is there. Everything is going according to plan. And this is emboldening them. And they're making such brazen moves to continue because I think they feel like they're in control of the Supreme Court. They're in control of the Florida bar. They're in control of all of these, major entities that would normally take action against allegations like this.
Now,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I saw your complaint that you made with the Florida bar, and they dismissed it. Well, and I read that. What did you feel about how they judged your complaint?
I was shocked by that. Let me see if I can find it here. They just said, let me find the one against Seth Hyman. It basically said the matters upon which your allegations are premised involve a civil dispute and questions of law. The Florida bar is not the correct forum to have such legal issues adjudicated. And I'm like, I'm just shocked. Those were all exhibits. They're publicly filed. Everybody should be able to see them under the lawsuit in Orange County, Florida. And I just felt like just shocked. So I'm going to resubmit them now that what I told them, what I predicted would happen, happened. So I'm going to resubmit it. I'm going to put the emphasis on Seth Hyman here because he really is the one who is in the know and has everything, has all the information on everyone. And I hope that the Florida bar will now investigate because they're in charge of disciplinary behavior and they can, investigate. I was on a grievance committee for years. They can assign an investigator to investigate the truth as to my allegations. And if there's nothing there, they can make that judgment. But if there's something there, and I know they'll find something there, Mr. Hyman could be in a lot of trouble with his Florida bar license.
And you mentioned, let's talk about Seth Hyman for a moment because he did. I did look at at the race a couple months ago and looked at the candidates running, and I think he was doing okay, like fundraising. And I did not know his background. And what makes it interesting as I learn more about this situation, as you mentioned, he did work in the state attorney's office and he was let go, right? So he had some issues there. Objectively looking, he might not have been the best candidate, certainly for the governor to get behind, but the governor did get behind him. And what was the issue? How did he get released from the state attorney's office?
He was terminated for unethical behavior. He wanted the public defender's office was upset for him withholding exculpatory information or evidence. The judiciary, Judge Dan Traver at the time, wanted to refer him to the Florida bar for his unethical behavior. And ultimately, multiple instances of withholding evidence, multiple complaints from multiple entities, private lawyers, public defender lawyers, the judiciary. It all came back to Deborah Barra, who sat down with him and did the final termination. And it was absolutely not politically motivated like he is saying now. That is so offensive to everybody who works here. It's well documented. He got fired in 2017 for unethical behavior, and he never made it a point or ever said, oh, this was by woke prosecutors until, he wanted it to work to his advantage with these the Republican chapters. And Mitch, if I may, I want to say one other thing too. I sent multiple letters to the leadership of the Republican Party of Florida trying to stop this. I wrote letters to their general counsel, to the leadership, anyone I can find. And I said, guys, what the hell's going on here? Aaron Huntley and Joshua Grosshands and all these guys are pushing Seth on our our people, our Republican Party, and they're just going along with it, man, because they trust Aaron Huntley and Josh Grossans and all these people who are well connected with the governor, and they're just like, yeah, whatever you guys say. And they hid the fact from them that he was terminated. When I got to speak in front of them, all of them were shocked that Seth Hyman was fired. And after I brought that to their attention, Seth Hyman comes up to me and calls me an a-hole. And I'm like, why would you hide that from the people? You tried to hoodwink them and mislead them. And that was so offensive to me because I saw a lot of very elder senior citizens and military veterans there in the crowd. And they just said, no, that's all BS. That's woke prosecutors. That's why Seth got fired. It was all a sham.
When they said they were going to come after you and your family, that sounds to me like a threat. Is that how you took it? And are you worried at this point, now that you're speaking out sort of publicly about the whole charade?
Look, I know what's right and I know what's wrong. If I didn't stand up to these people, I would allow wrong to get away, or to allow them to get away with it. So I don't want to have any regrets when I'm on my deathbed someday. If they want to do something against me, let them. It's on them. It's on their souls, and it's on their karma. I want to put good karma out there. I want to set the right example. What they're doing is wrong. It's unethical. I hope the Florida Bar takes action. I hope FDLE gets involved. I hope the Commission on Ethics gets involved. All they have to do is get the records, begin an investigation, and they'll have, I think, more than they need to go after all of these people for what they've done, because that is the truth.
Hey, Thomas, especially after this debate here, a lot of people are wondering about the Republican Party and whether the style of governance and the way they do things has become a feature or is a bug and an anomaly. You mentioned, your discourse with some Republican officials. How or has this changed your relationship with your party and the way you kind of want to move forward in your career? And obviously it sounds like you're going to, stay active in elections and whatnot.
All I care about is the good people and the elder senior citizens and the military veterans, and making sure they're not being exploited. I have really never had much interest in politics. I just wanted to be state attorney because I feel like that's an incredible office I could lead and make a difference in our community, but I have no aspirations north of that. I think Andrew Bain does, and I think with time we will see where he goes with his career, and I think he's just using us as a stepping stone. So,
I was going to say that, Tom, I'm sorry, Thomas. And again, we want to remind our listeners we're talking to Thomas Fighter. He is an Orlando-based attorney, a Republican who was running in the Republican primary last month in the 9th Judicial Circuit, where he lost to Seth Hyman, who then dropped out of the race. Of course, that's Democrat Monique Worrell, who got suspended by Ron DeSantis, is also running in that race against independent candidate Andrew Bain. And you just mentioned this. This is why I'm interjecting right now, because what I can tell, Mr. Fighter, is that I don't think you, and I say this complimentarily, is that you're not really involved with the political system there, because something like this happening, this is different on a statewide level, but I know if it's happened in Hillsborough County, where I'm at right now here, in terms of, I know specifically the Republican Party, maybe it's happened on the Democratic Party side, where the parties has their favorite, right? And they want somebody to run, and they don't want somebody else to run, and they intervene, and often, different things are optioned or made available, what have you. It seems like what the difference is here, that you're not playing along with the system here, because again, you're not a guy with a big political background. You're based as an attorney here. That's your main thing. But the state attorney's position is something obviously you have the qualifications for, so you got involved with. But now you're involved in something seemingly much bigger than yourself here, where, as we know with Governor DeSantis, he suspended Andrew Warren here in Tampa. He suspended Monique Worrell a year ago because, as you said, a woke prosecutor, somebody who got money from George Soros. And so there seems to be a mission going on here with the governor's office here, and you're kind of part of the collateral damage here, and you're not taking it.
No, I'm pretty resilient, and I think most people, I'm blessed to have a level of resilience for a number of reasons, but I think most people need to just accept it and stay where they are. They need their job, and I respect that. I understand that. I'm not insensitive to that, but I will not give in to these people who think they have power, because when there's a regime change and there's a new governor, hopefully it's someone who is completely not aligned with Governor DeSantis, we can get a new administration, and all these people will lose all of their power and influence over the Republican Party. And then we will be able to judge based on what they leave behind, why they did certain things. And we will all see that they were all of them, selfishly motivated. They do not believe in selfless service. They're a bunch of 30-somethings and 40-somethings who are trying to line their pockets to make their lives easier at the expense of the rest of us.
If we could take a call, Thomas, we've got somebody who actually wants to call in here, so I think we'll see how this goes here. Dylan from Tampa, you're on the air here.
Hi, this is Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Yeah, Dylan, what's your question?
I actually wanted to share some news that went down yesterday in the federal district court.
Okay, Dylan, can you call back in a few minutes? We'll have some open phones. Call back, or we can't put you on hold, but call back in like 5 minutes, okay? Because we can talk about, I think you're maybe talking about the Uhuru situation, which we definitely would like to talk about, but we still have our guest here, Thomas Fighter here. Want to stay on topic here. My colleagues, any other questions for me? Comments?
No, I mean, right now, Thomas, we're working a story about whether or not the DeSantis administration would look to previous, cases and rulings in the Florida Supreme Court and U.S. Supreme Court to perhaps remove Worrell or Warren should they win the election. Are you worried about that type of thing happening?
I think there's a very real possibility that Monique Worrell wins. Historically, Democrats win here, and the NPAs vote towards a Democrat. I also think there's a very real possibility because of what they told me. They told me they would raise so many millions of dollars to ensure Bain wins the election that I shouldn't even try as a Republican. So that has me concerned that if they throw, I don't know, $3, $4, $5 million, Bain could win, and they're going to hide all of their Republican supporters. They're going to hide it behind PACs and political action committees to send out a bunch of mailers blasting Monique and praising Bain, and that's how I think Bain can win. The other option is that if Monique wins, I think they told me the plan is to remove her again and just put Bain back in.
You've been told that?
Yes, I have.
Who told you that?
James Othmeyer, Jeff Aaron, and Joshua Grosshans.
What is he like, James Othmeyer? I've never met him.
He's a young man. He's very nice enough. But again, he's somebody who I don't think has ever achieved much in his professional career. He just latched on to Ron DeSantis's meteoric rise to fame and power. They all think he has the potential to be a president of the United States, which I think is a joke. Ron DeSantis, before he became governor, had no net worth. He is completely obsessed with lining his own pockets and he thinks he could be the next JFK and his wife, the next Jackie, I guess. Yeah. It's sickening. They're not doing it out of selfless service. And this is not the example we need to be setting for our children and our grandchildren. This is it's terrible. His net worth has gone up, only because he sold some book, quote unquote. And my argument is there's a bunch of connexes or trailers that where the RPO, the Republican Party, just bought 1 million copies of his book. So there you go, Ron. Now you're all set. Now you have a net worth. He didn't even own a house.
I bought one and read it. You contributed. I bought one. I might not have bought it.
I think it was an assignment,
but I did read it. I read the whole thing.
All right, Thomas Fighter, we're gonna leave it there. Thomas Fighter, really appreciate you coming on, telling your story to our listeners here who now have a lot more information about your situation. We'll be following it very closely here, definitely, as we not only have this election going on, but also your own separate lawsuit there. Now, I think I saw in your lawsuit, part of what you're asking for is for the judge to put you in as a Republican candidate. Is that correct?
That's still my hope. I hope it's not a pie-in-the-sky dream, but I am asking to be the Republican candidate. I know that most of the Republican people are good people, and they're not in with this faction. Once we expose them for what they've been doing, for exploiting the rest of us as Republicans, I think they will all turn their backs, and the house of cards will fall.
I appreciate you reminding us over and over again that this is about selfless service, that should be our driving sort of ambition or ideal in politics, selfless service. And we forget that a lot of times. I think it becomes a game, and it's too bad. So this is very important. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Thomas. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Thomas.
Of course, gentlemen. Take care.
All right. Wow.
That was something.
That was something. That last part there, where he basically put it on the record. That's what, again, it's a he said thing. We can contact the governor's office after this, interview and see if they want to agree with that.
Yeah, if you want to call in from the governor's office.
Well, I don't think we're going to directly even. I mean, they once in a blue moon they even respond back to my emails. But he said at the end there again, Thomas Fighter. Again, if you're just tuning in here, this is pretty explosive. Okay, he is because this is what I said at the end of him, because this really reminds me of this. It reminds me of certain people who are not political animals, right? They are, in the case of a state attorney's race, where, again, to be fair, and he said this, that's a very Democratic-leaning area. So, but there's going to be a Republican nominee. But you know what? There isn't in this race, because the candidate who was running against Monique Worrell is an independent, Andrew Bain, who at one point was a Democrat, who I was reading of this, again, this is getting deep into the Orlando politics, but Andrew Bain, who Ron DeSantis selected in August of last year to replace Monique Worrell, at some point said, I'm an independent now, because again, it's politically toxic basically in that district to be a Republican. So they're not backing a Republican, right? Bain is their guy, and they're not. So it seems to me that some people who believe in the Republican Party of Florida and we should have a Republican running in every race, you'd rather have a Republican running, but no, they don't in this case. They don't think, whether it's Mr. Fighter or this other guy, Seth Hyman, who did win the election, we should say, a couple weeks ago, August 20th primary, but did back out, which Mr. Fighter said was all part of the game plan. So this doesn't seem so far-fetched. What is the question, though, to me is this is now in the courts in Orlando in the Ninth Judicial Circuit. We'll see what happens with that. He mentioned the fact that this Florida Supreme Court is basically a lot of DeSantis appointees now. So I don't know if it gets that far or not. Something to definitely watch. But my point, what I was saying was, guys, is that he is somebody who was not a political animal, and he got caught in a political system here. And he's basically reacting like, why are you guys doing it this way? And he's not acting in a way that they're not prepared for. This is
not how it's supposed to go.
He's Mr. Innocent guy here. Mr.
Right.
Smith goes to Washington, and he's caught up in this thing now, and he's like offended by the way that hardball politics is played. And I think we're reading it. A lot of this is back behind the scenes. You usually don't get to see this or hear this. It's not like it's never gone on before.
Yeah, I mean, the meeting he described was crazy, and his complaint to the bar is pretty intense too. He talks about the machinations of this plan where if Worrell wins, and DeSantis suspends her, it would have to be the second runner-up. But if there was a third person who finished second, then it wouldn't be Bain. So, I mean, I encourage anybody to read that complaint. It's linked in the Florida Phoenix story, which we'll link in our WMNF blog about this. But yeah, that was pretty wild.
And by the way, we have a note from our friend Ernie Bach, he's a member of the Independent Party of Florida. And that's a specific party. That's not like an independent. It's an Independent Party of Florida. And by the way, I saw Ernie. He was on Bay News 9, actually. My former colleague, Dahlia Dangerfield, did a story with him the other day. So he says, listening to this, he wants the people to know Mr. Fighter has blown the whistle on the behind-the-scenes attempt to control that race, has named names and spoken the words. And he says, let me make this clarifying statement regarding Mr. Bain. He is not the candidate of the Independent Party of Florida. He has not contacted us about this, and he's not endorsed or supported by the Independent Party of Florida. No, he's actually not with any party, Andrew Bain. He's the NPA, non-party affiliated candidate in Orlando, the Orange County, Osceola County race. Wow. All right, guys, we've got 10 minutes left to go, and we'll open the phones up. And the person who called a few minutes ago, if you want to call back, I apologize. I just did not want to talk about, I wanted to keep on Mr. Fighter there, and I thought you were calling about that. But certainly we have 10 minutes left of the program here. Well, we have it open, guys. Let's talk about some of the political things going on. Interesting. So Donald Trump announced yesterday that he's not going to debate Kamala Harris for president now, and a lot of people don't believe that. We'll see how this goes.
People don't believe what Trump says.
Yeah. But this is a trend now. Rick Scott. So the Rick Scott, Debbie Merkersol-Powell race in the U.S. Senate, and he still leads, but it's getting maybe closer. Depending on the polls. Basically, he's got. I think overall, if I had to aggregate the polls, he's got like a 4 or 5 point lead still. One poll had him like only 1 point down, or her only 1 point down. So it may be getting closer. But Rick Scott, surprisingly to me, maybe he's playing a game here, is not committed to doing a debate. Not even one debate yet.
Which is interesting because he's not really terrible in that setting.
No, and he's in a state with 1 million more Republicans registered, okay? So theoretically, I don't know what he's worried about. And he did debate, Bill Nelson 6 years ago. Marco Rubio did do one debate with Val Demings 1 year ago. 2 years ago. I don't know if this is a new trend. Now, we have here in Pinellas County, I saw a new statement this morning by Whitney Fox, who's a Democratic candidate in CD13, the Pinellas County Congressional District. She desperately wants a debate with Anna Paulina Luna, who is getting in a lot of heat, by the way, because she has not come out one way or the other on Amendment 4, the abortion rights measure.
She's hinted at her position.
Right. On our show,
she
did last month. She hinted, but she did not. I listened back to it, by the way. I would have loved to say no. She said for sure. Look, I think maybe we know she says I'm pro-life where she's going, but she will not commit to that because she knows it's not a popular issue in a moderate district like CD13. But she is not debated. And by the way, I should say that I personally have reached out to her camp and Whitney Fox, and I said we would love to host a debate here on the Skinny any Friday before the election, and we hope that happens, by the way. But it's another trend here. It's not just Trump, but Rick Scott and Paulina Luna. And by the way, I will be fair, Kathy Castor, and she never debates her Democratic opponents. So these incumbents, not one, in the case of Donald Trump, he's not an incumbent. But I just think it's bad for our democracy that we can't get at least one formed. We can hear.
I think Ashley Brundage has also called for a debate in her race, and yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It's part of it, like on the local level or like the Kathy Castor level, and maybe even the Anna Paulina Luna level, is like Castor. We had a debate with her when she ran 2006, when she won that seat for the first time, when it was an open seat. We had 5 people here who were running in that. Basically, Representative Castor has never, ever since then, ever debated with her opponents. Basically, I guess the idea is I don't feel challenged. I don't need to give my opponent a platform. I think that's not good, by the way. I've said that when it comes to Representative Castor, but I'll say it, the Republicans as well. And somebody called me yesterday and said that even at these Tiger Bay forums or these public forums, you're not seeing some Republican candidates showing up or even answering questionnaires. WMNF apparently has a thing on their website about a voter guide, and they reached out to all these different candidates, and some have responded and others haven't. And that's just a problem for the voters here. We're just here trying to get information, right? We got a big election, local election, statewide election, federal election on November 5th. We're going to start vote by mail ballots are going out in a couple of weeks here. And it's just something that we want to see. Okay, Dylan has called back in. Good.
Do you think? Do you think it's the case that people think it no longer matters? It doesn't matter. It's not worth your time to debate.
Oh, I think that is absolutely the case, Ben. I think that in some situations, like not going to Tiger Bay. I know that some Republicans think that Tiger Bay is a Democratic club, basically. They don't think they're going to get anything out of it.
I don't know if they've been to Tiger Bay lately, but
really?
I mean, it's really one of the most, I think,
Tampa,
the crowd is certainly feisty. And for those who aren't familiar, Tiger Bay is a political forum. Right. Really, the candidates come together. It's a really lively group. The questions are really smart, and it's a really good chance to see a lot of candidates on one stage.
But I think
to
answer your point, Ben, it's like, right, and this goes even to Donald Trump, right? And we'll see. Again, a lot of people think he maybe will back down. We'll see. Who knows? But Rick Scott, let's talk about Rick Scott. This is a very interesting Senate race between Mercosur Powell. Does he get a benefit? He is, I think right now he would think that I'm winning this race right now. I'm going to put way more money into it. I don't really have much of a problem here. Why would I want to give her that?
To expose myself to the risk and
also give her a bigger platform than because she's much less well funded than he is.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Is bad for democracy.
It's bad for democracy. It may be good for the candidate, though.
Right.
Right. So okay, Dylan has called back in. Dylan, thank you for calling in. Sorry for not. I couldn't put you on hold. So anyway, you called back. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up free speech.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a giant case 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you're familiar with the Uhuru 3.
Yeah.
Oh, we had him
on a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, the verdict came in yesterday, and they were found not guilty of being agents of the Russian government. And this is a huge win.
Well, they also were found guilty on other
conspiracy charges.
Yeah, they were found guilty for conspiracy for potentially being a foreign agent. But they were found, and they were also found guilty of bringing up this matter of free speech.
Mm-hmm. Right, that was definitely their defense.
It's a big win for all.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I know they're spinning it.
They came out of the courtroom jubilant, celebrating. You can see it both ways. Depends on sentencing, I guess. I mean, if you maybe it helps if you wind up.
Well, that is a 5-year charge you're looking at on this charge if they don't appeal.
Maximum, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but interesting, though, case about free speech. Can you criticize the federal government with the support of Russians, not conspiring with Russians, but with the support of them. Is that okay? It turns out it's not. The Uhurus are thankful they didn't take any money. They didn't truly, conspire or anything like that. And they'll continue to criticize the government.
And, to Dylan's tone, Dylan, I don't know your affiliation with the Uhurus or whatnot, but I feel like the Uhurus have been trying to get this message out for a long time. And for a lot of time, even in our traditional world of media, a lot of times they don't get heard in our publications. And I think they were heard in a big way just in that courthouse there in downtown Tampa.
Yeah. I think it's just really important that we keep fighting for free speech and for the self-determination of all people.
Amen. All right. Well,
Thanks
thank you,
for the comment, Dylan.
Appreciate you calling back. Thank you so much.
We do have a few minutes, by the way, if anybody wants to call.
Yeah, a couple more minutes if anybody wants to weigh in on anything political here.
433-0885.
We only have 7 more Fridays, guys, before the election, so we're going to try to keep it focused on although I should say in a couple weeks we're going to have Sheriff Bob Gautieri, who I think has already been reelected again.
Unopposed, yeah.
Because part of I wanted to get him on today because he's involved very much with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act. They're still meeting all the time, working to make sure. And I think it's something that is. And my colleague actually in the Florida Phoenix actually wrote yesterday, because as Representative Hunschofsky said, we have not had a big school shooting since then, thankfully, since Parkland. But in fact,
there have been school shootings, just not as big.
Well, in Florida, I don't know. I mean, you're talking Florida, for sure, around the country. Oh, definitely, tragically. But the Florida Phoenix reported yesterday, amid a spate of school shooting threats less than a month into a new school year, Florida school districts are reminding students and communities of the danger and potential long-term consequences of making even hoax threats. Violent threats against schools have been reported in districts around Florida, including Seminole, Broward, Duval, Madison, Leon, Taylor, Levi, Columbia, and Sarasota counties this new school year. Not again, any incidents, but just kids calling in, doing quote-unquote jokes. But no, nothing like that's happened. But anyway, so we're going to have Gautieri on, but we're going to also have Susie Lopez, like I said, and we're going to try to bring in more candidates here to inform you, the listeners here, this major election. Of course, we've got again the presidential race, we have the U.S. Senate race, we have congressional races everywhere. The CD13 in Pinellas is considered, of all the races in Florida, none of them are really considered to be threatened by the incumbents. We have 20 Republicans and 8 Democrats right now. Status quo is expected to happen, but Whitney Fox does really believe that she might have a chance in Pinellas County with the NPA vote, and also some Republicans who maybe are turned off by Anna Paulina Luna being too far to the right. We'll see about that. I don't know. It's going to be a tough haul. I've always felt that way about that race, but she's getting a lot of national attention now. The New York Times wrote about this race a couple of weeks ago, and so. She was winning in a St. Pete poll. I know, but we'll see about that. But anyway, we have invited those 2 candidates on, and I will if Anna Paulina Luna does not come on, which hopefully she will. Maybe we'll just bring on Whitney Fox. She give her a chance because again, as long as you ask both candidates, if one candidate doesn't want to come on, we can still have the other candidate on here.
Sure, yeah, and it's really interesting. Lately with a lot of good reporting from Justin Garcia, we've been talking a lot about the election police, that gives people some level of anxiety. But I think we're all still wondering, how is this Republican registration advantage really going to play out? Here.
Well,
what does that look like?
Well, I would tell you what it looked. Well, 2 years ago, it looked like a 19-point victory for Ron DeSantis and a 16-point victory for Marco Rubio. Now, the part of what Democrats will say in their right is that Democrats did not vote at all. So that whatever it was, that margin was, it wasn't 1 million, maybe it was like 300,000, but it felt even bigger because Dems were not inspired. They are, with Kamala Harris on the top of the ticket, now inspired. So. Look, I mean, most of the polls, but now even with Harris and Trump, have been 4 points. Trump, roughly. You see some a little closer, but I think the mean has been 4 or 5 points right now still for Donald Trump in this state. So that's what it's looking like. Rick Scott, I'd say basically the same. So it's a Republican-leaning state. I mean, Democrats will have to. They don't want to admit that. They don't want to give you that even. But come on, Hillsborough County. And we've got some big places in Pinellas County. Charlie Justice is trying to be reelected for a fourth term, I believe. The Pinellas County Commission went Republican 2 years ago. Will go even more Republican in 2 months. So Anyway, so we've got that going on. So again, we'll keep it going with the elections here until the November 5th election, and try to give you as much information as we can as our responsibility here with this powerful tool that is WMNF 88.5 FM.
We'll keep asking the questions. You keep coming around to listen, and take us away, Ray.
Yeah, thanks for listening to WMNF Tampa. It's been an exciting morning of tea here. Thank you to Irene Matthews on the phone, Skip Sassy on the boards, and a huge thank you to everybody who called in and went online to donate last week. We can't say enough how huge that is that you support what we do here. On behalf of myself, Mitch Perry, and Ben Montgomery, this has been The Skinny for Friday, September 13th. We'll see you in a week with Susie Lopez.